Hey, yes, I'm Webb, and I'm a software developer and co-founder at Open Data Services. Uh, uh, do I need to be closer? Or, software developer and co-founder at Open Data Services, a worker cooperative that works on various data initiatives for social good. And the oldest of these data initiatives is the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IATI or IATI for short, which is about the transparency of development and humanitarian spending and its results. The initiative is approximately 15 years old, and there are now over 1,800 organizations reporting data. So I just pulled out the top 30 organizations by file size, and there's a bunch of different types of organizations represented here too, governmental, multilateral, private and civil society. There's a variety of different uses of the data too. So here are some examples. So the countries that receive aid, partner countries can understand what money is coming into the country and how that might influence their own budgets. Thematic communities, which are groups interested in a particular theme, like food securities, for researchers to analyze aid and its impacts, and for journalists to hold authorities to account, and for donors to explain their own spending and understand others. So now to talk about the technical infrastructure a bit. There's a lot of stuff in this diagram, so I'm going to build it up step by step. And I would say IATI has this essentially decentralized publishing model with various centralized features laid on top of it. So the decentralized bit, each organization is responsible for publishing their data publicly at a HTTP URL, and obviously anyone can come along and get that data and do something with it. And this pull-based approach gives organizations a lot of flexibility for how they put data at that URL. It might be a direct call to an API that they have, or it might be a file upload into a CMS that happens after some sort of manual review process. It's very important to be able to compare this data between different organizations. So IATI maintains an XML standard for the data, and I put it on this diagram with a sort of teal background to show that IATI is sort of centrally responsible for it. So because I like to put some data on a slide, here's some XML from the Italian Agency for Cooperation and Development. And it's split into a bunch of IATI activity elements, which roughly corresponds to a project. And what sort of data do we have about these projects? So financial information, so forward-looking budgets and historical transactions, location data, sectors, so that's the classification of the purpose of the activity, results, so the outputs, outcomes and impacts of the activity, conditions, so whether the aid is tied, and various parts of this XML structure can have links to external narrative documents that already exist, usually as PDFs. And then for most use cases, there needs to be a way of discovering all this data. And we're talking about a few thousand data sets. So it's pretty feasible to have a list of all of them. So IATI maintains a central registry. And as it's centrally provided by IATI, it's here in teal again. But it's enough entries for it to be cumbersome to maintain with one person. So we have a self-serve registry that organizations can log into and amend their own URLs. And this sort of data standard and registry are the backbone of IATI. So it's sort of the foundation from which it's possible to publish and use IATI data with all of these. Next, we have the IATI validator. So we have this tool, and anyone can do XML validation against our schema, but it's often more convenient for people to just upload it to our website. And additionally, we have a bunch of extra checks that aren't possible to do with XML schema. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is why not CSV? Because I know that this conference isn't solely about CSVs, but it's a good question. The reason is because this is quite nested data that's a lot easier to model in a structure like XML or JSON. But we know that many users do want the data in a CSV or spreadsheet format. And additionally, users want to be able to search or query the data rather than having to download all of it, because the whole data set comes in at about a gigabyte compressed. So anyone could go and build a tool that goes to the registry, downloads all the URLs, and makes it available somehow. Various third parties have built public tools for that. There's some use cases that weren't covered very well for these, so IATI maintains a bunch of central tooling. And this also tries and helps to avoid some duplicate work. So we've got a data user that might be using the data directly, and a tool that aggregates it for the other users. And then we've got the same diagram, but some boxes in teal for tools that the IATI looks after centrally. But the important thing, all these things are a convenience for data users. They are optional. So what are the tools that IATI does provide? So we have what we call the bulk data service, which basically provides a big zip file of all of the data. We have the IATI data store, which is a HTTP API based on Solr that people can query. We have IATI tables, which produces CSV, SQLite, and Postgres database downloads for people based on the data. And we also run a public instance of a piece of software called Dataset, which you can see here, that lets people run SQL queries in a web interface. We have a tool called the Country Development Finance Data Tool, CDFD, which is basically a spreadsheet generator tool. And we have what's called dportal, which is a searchable web interface for the data. So we have a whole bunch, so we have a bunch of different ways there of sort of searching and querying. So we've got SQL and Solr queries and free text search. And we've got a whole bunch of different output formats, XML, JSON, and multiple spreadsheet formats. And that isn't actually duplication, since we're dealing with nested data. There's multiple ways of turning it into a spreadsheet. So we have these multiple shapes of spreadsheet for different use cases. So a lot of these tools want a copy of all of the data. And as they've grown organically, many have their own steps for downloading the data. And although downloading from a list of URLs seems simple if everything goes well, there's a bunch of ways things go wrong. So we built the bulk data service as the one place where we download all of the data. gets it, makes a zip file, and it does a bunch of things for us, handles bad data in a consistent way. Previously, people were asking why their data showed up in one tool but not others. It exposes error information through an API and in the zip file. It keeps a copy of data for 3 days if it wasn't possible to download it most recently. And it re-downloads data every hour using e-tags where possible to reduce traffic. All our tooling is being migrated over to use this, as you can see in the diagram, and it's available to be used for external tools. And using any of this tooling is optional for data users, and it's also open source, so anyone can modify it and run it themselves if they have specific needs to meet. So who uses these different ways of getting at the data? So governments want to understand what aid is coming into their country so that they can plan their own spending in a way that complements it. Because they care about a specific country, it's convenient for them to use one of our tools that aggregates all the data and allows filtering by a recipient country. And often they have existing aid information management systems or AIMS, and 10 countries have integrated this data into these systems. And often they use the IATI Data Store tool as it's possible to filter, but get the original XML blobs to work with. And a bunch more countries are systematically using IATI data for decision making by other means, usually with spreadsheets through the CDFD tool, which has been built with this in mind. And it produces a single spreadsheet that's sort of simplified with multiple rows per project, but financials aggregated by quarter. And then thematic communities. So IATI data is categorized into sectors, but these often don't map directly into themes or are underreported. So it's necessary to create a complex query to get this slice of the data. So yeah, we want to select multiple sectors, but also do a free text search. And the IATI data source Solr-backed queries are well suited for doing that. So for example, here, GAFS, the Global Alliance for Food Security, uses the approach to find data about food security and combine it with other data sources in their dashboard. And researchers often want a subset or aggregations of data that we don't already cater for. And this is where the dataset-based component of IATI tables can be useful, as you can do arbitrary SQL queries to get the shape of the data that you want. Other researchers care about authoritative data, so use our registry to find the data and the URLs from the original reporting organizations' websites. Often donor country governments use their own IATI data to build their websites, which has a couple of advantages for them. So if they've gone through an approval process for their data, they don't have to do that again for their website, and they can reuse some of the tooling. So this is the Dutch government's website called Metis, and it pulls in some information from their own data, but also data of organizations that they fund to give a fuller picture of what happens with the money that they spend. So IATI's infrastructure aims to meet varied user needs by having a small, clear foundation of the standard and the registry, and then various pieces of tooling layered on top. There's a maintenance cost to this, though, to maintain a bunch of different tools, and we're looking at mitigating this by having shared tooling like the bulk data service. This talk was all about IATI, but at Open Data Services, we do similar work on a bunch of different social issues, from fair procurement, charitable giving, and transparency in corporate ownership. And we're always interested in how we can make data more useful for public good. So if you're working with a similar challenge, do get in touch. And that's me. Thank you. Any questions?
Hello, hello. Yes. Thank you very much for the work you are doing. I am part of an organization that is right now working with IATI, and we have the client data, and we want to generate a final XML compilant or valid final file. And we want ask to the user to create CSV file, and we develop an open source tool to transform multiple CSV file into one XML, and it's valid. And we were looking for tools like this. And I want to ask you how open source community is involved with AIT, because we did not found a lot of things as open source, not a software that you can download for free or use online. I mean, free software. Is that there's a community creating open source tools?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, most of what I've shown is free and open source software, and I think you were talking about publication of data there.
Yes, yes, to get a final XML to publish.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I guess the thing I didn't go into because of the length of the talk is that there's also a bunch of different tooling for producing the data. So we have got open source tooling that will take a bunch of CSVs to make the data, to make a IATI XML file. And yeah, a bunch of other tooling for sort of manual data input and various ways of generating the data. So yeah, just as we have all these outputs, there's similarly various inputs.
Thank you.
Working for a for-profit company, we're always but one theoretical public benefit arm. We are always interested in cost reductions when pushing data, when publishing data. Have you noticed that there are sort of patterns of cost versus use of the public data tooling, of whether it's all the cost is in the bulk data export, or whether there's griefers on your dataset instance or something like that? Anything where I can sort of lobby to the board to give me funding to add a more variety of public data options? Sorry,
sure.
rephrasing. Have you noticed any patterns in the cost versus the popularity of use of the various IATI public data tools?
Okay, yeah, I follow. I mean, I think dataset has been incredibly useful as a sort of off-the-shelf tool. So it's like dataset, but it's cassettes, like yeah, EETTE at the end, which I suspect you might be familiar with, but like that, it's sort of because the data's XML, we've got this pipeline to turn it into a Postgres or SQLite database. So we have to do that bit, but sort of once it's in that database, sort of the dataset tool just will just take that and allow this sort of SQL query API on top of it. It's quite nice. So and yeah, that that gets quite a lot of use. Sort of think a bit less cost. That answers your question.
More or less, yes. It seems as though cost of the SQL interface is not a concern, and so maybe I should be talking to my overlords about actually being able to turn that on for people. Thank you.